Thank you, Steve. My mic was muted. Well, that gave everyone a chance to jump on as we go through this, and it also gives me a chance to send this over to everyone as well. So I just wanted to, you should be able to hear me now, Tracy. Can you hear? Can someone just chat over? Can they now hear me? All right. Let me see. Yes, you can hear me. Thank you. All right, perfect. This took a minute to load up there with everyone. Thank you, Tracy, Steve, Justin, everyone. So as I was saying, and everyone was jumping on there at the last minute, so I was just reminding everyone, and now it's telling me we're having audio issues. Oh, okay, we're back. It is, everyone, if you see me sway in here, it is extremely windy down here. And that often sometimes creates some issues with me with the internet. So hopefully that will not be true for us and that we will connect through audio. What I was just reminding everyone is that they keep their eyes constantly towards the resources that are available for updated information, which is almost changing by the minute. So if you haven't taken an opportunity to bookmark the COVID-19 pages from the Greater Boston Association of Realtors, the Mass Association of Realtors, and the National Association of Realtors, I do. We also have some guests on here as well who may not be from those local associations. I guarantee you your local and state association have those pages as well, and NAR is doing a really great job of keeping us informed on the national level so that we all know exactly what is going on minute to minute, hour by hour. I also sent over to everyone, I cut and pasted the link for the platform for these webinars. So just to remind everyone, this is our third in our series of 5-part webinars. So there's 2 more for you to sign up for. Next Monday, we're going to be doing implementing change, which is going to be significantly important, as we've talked about, as people are making all these decisions. And on Friday, RPR is going to be doing a special presentation for you. So that the link that I just sent everyone will get you to the sign up page for those. And if I have anyone who missed our other sessions and you want to take a look at them, or you have seen them and you want to review them or share some of the information, the recordings of them are also up on that same page. So that's a great resource for you to have. So I want to just make sure everyone has all of as much information as they can on a regular basis. So what are we going to be talking about today? Yeah. Clear and present danger may have been a presentation you may have heard me do in the last about year or so. I've been out there. It's been one of my big breakout sessions at conventions that I've been doing. And so I took a look at this program and I realized there was some really important information, but we have an hour. So I needed to really focus in on it. So we're going to be taking a look at really what I think are 2 of the most significant dangers that you may be facing as a broker owner, manager, team leader. And I would love to hear as well and have you share with me if you are facing any of these issues now, if you're anticipating, or et cetera. I've also had discussions with some of my really close friends and national speakers out there, and these are really 2 issues that we feel may be of significant impact as we move on. So let's take a look at what we are talking about. If you hang on one second, I want to move my camera out of the way so I can see your questions. And The most important thing that I really want to share is, what is risk? What does that mean to you? And it actually, in my opinion, has two meanings. And number one is to you, right? So that noun, if you're taking a risk, the situation involving exposure to danger. Yikes, two crazy words, right? Exposure to danger. And if you have not, in very recent times, I'm going to recommend, highly recommend, almost stamp my foot and insist, recommend that you take a look at your errors and omissions policy, because I think this is really important that you understand what you are or are not covered for, how they handle things. If you are unfamiliar, you can't find your paperwork, it's, you know, in your closed down bricks and mortar office, et cetera, then get on the phone with the provider of your errors and omission insurance and really review what some of the things are, particularly that we're going to talk about. But here's something even more significant, I think, is what it means to the consumer, your action, which means you're exposing someone or something to danger or harm. Yeah. Are your day-to-day practices right now potentially exposing, and guys, I'm not talking about the virus here, all right? You know, we could debate this till the end of the moon about essential workers or, you know, activities or et cetera. This is not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm not going to be talking about exposure to the harm of the actual virus here. We're going to be talking about exposures of things, frankly, existed before this, just in a drastically different way, and how they're going to twist and turn to be even more impactful on our day-to-day business. So how are we handling it? What policies, procedures, what training, what types of things are we implementing as broker owners, managers, or team leaders for our agents and staff and you know, assistants and et cetera, and how are those being implemented to the consumer? And by the way, one of these topics, we're going to talk a little bit about potentially the consumer driving there. So are you, Martha, are you just seeing a delay in the slides load? And if so, that is potentially, and again, you're down near me, so you're experiencing this wind as well from that. And if you are having a hesitation to audio, I'll remind everyone that a webinar or any of these type of virtual platforms take a large amount of broadband width. So if you're able to close out other programs using the internet, you know, your email, your web browser, et cetera, that usually helps. If you try to dedicate as much broadband width in your household to your use, which I know is not always easy for everyone here, that usually helps as well. So hopefully those two things may help through the process here. So let's get into number one. Yeah, the number one issue I think that you're facing is fair housing. And here's one of the aspects I think we're going to have some issues with our end of the business. We're also potentially going to have some issues with the consumer end. And so we're going to talk about it from both perspectives as we kind of figure out exactly where we want to be. Now, you all may or may not know, you would have known if we'd still been able to meet in person, because there were so many activities planned, but April is Fair Housing Month in the Realtor organization. And so there were lots of big plans out there to do a lot of things in regards to fair housing, particularly because of some very recent instances. I'm going to put that up later on, everyone, so you'll have the information. And oh, by the way, I guess I didn't say when I was going over housekeeping, since the last two episodes we did, so many of you asked you for the slide presentation, they are loaded here in the handout section. So if you look to your toolbar, which is typically at the bottom of your screen, but it depends upon the type of device and how you're holding it, it is. So look for your toolbar. You'll see what looks like the sheets of paper. That means it's a handout. Click on that, and the handout of the slide presentation is in a PDF format. So it doesn't matter if you're on a computer or mobile device or whatever you're on, you should be able to download it, and that will have the information of what I'm going to say. But many of you, hopefully everyone, that would be wonderful, everyone is aware of a very recent, it's actually launched while we were out in San Francisco at NAR, dropped, so to speak, was a 3-year investigation by Newsday, which is a Long Island news publication. And the title of it is known as Long Island Divided, and that's exactly how you will find the information. And frankly, it was not at all pleasant or flattering to our industry. So we were clearly ramping up to address this in a big way before all of this happened, and I'm going to highly recommend you do as well. Take a look at that, and again, I have a link in here for you to, or you know, a screenshot for you to get more information if you're not familiar with it and you haven't gone through it. But we were already struggling with this as an issue, and I think we're going to have some more issues as we come along. But before I go in too deeply, I do want to remind everyone on the orange side of your screen are our federal protected classes. On the right side of the screen these are the Massachusetts protected classes, in case I have anyone who may have jumped on from out of state. Because the majority of my the people attending are going to be from Massachusetts. So here are the Massachusetts protected classes. By the way, I think this is a good point to constantly be making explanations to the agents, and I tell agents they should have something that looks just like this in their presentation, right? They should have these as talking points to consumers, so that if in a situation arises later on in the transaction, presenting an offer to a listing agent, answering questions by a seller, answering questions by a buyer, those are the types of situations where the consumer often puts you in the position that if you answered those questions or addressed that issue or concern, you'd be in a fair housing violation. If you've talked about them up front in your presentation to your buyers and sellers, then that allows you to say, remember we had that conversation, you know, when a seller asks you, oh, is this the nice young couple with the, you know, 2 children, or this is the single man? Yeah, right. There you go, right up there on familial status, marital status. We hit a whole bunch of them, gender, you know, we hit a whole bunch all at once up there. So now that's when you can reply. And this is also where right now you can have some particular conversations to what may be highlighted protected classes. So we wanted to remind everyone of our protected classes, and let's move into a couple of significant issues that I think we have. My favorite clip within the Newsday session, everyone, which by the way, there's an entire 40-minute video, which is fabulous, and I highly recommend you watch it. And I would love to have all your agents watch it. But if you're looking to use some of this material in training or et cetera, there's a whole bunch of micro clips within the site that we're going to talk about. And my favorite clip, right, is in these in the Newsday investigation, everyone. It was probably the most thorough fair housing investigation I've ever seen in my life that went on. But there was hidden video recording, all right, going on as well. So there's the actual video recording of an agent who says to the client on the other side of the desk from them, you know, I really shouldn't say these things because, you know, they call it steering, but I like to call it giving you like good advice. I think Shakespeare said something about that, didn't he? About a rose by any other name? Yeah. Steering is steering, everyone, and this is going to be a significant issue, I think, as we move forward in that, which means It is directing a consumer towards or away from a particular market area. That was what was going on in the Long Island investigation. They were directing people of certain races and ethnicity towards or away from certain communities. It's often extremely subtle. And another eye-opening example is interviews done with the paired. This was a paired testing environment where they sent in a white person paired with a Black, Hispanic, or Asian. Those were the things they were testing for. And they interviewed the pairs who at that point didn't know necessarily what had happened to them. And in many cases, the Black, Asian, or Hispanic tester had been discriminated against. They had no idea. They had no idea. It was so subtle. It was so hard to detect. They had no idea that they were given different information, different facts, different advice or counsels. There was an extreme example where one consumer was told that the neighborhood was wonderful. That's how much the agent loved the people in that neighborhood. And the white tester received a text. By the way, I call that documentation against yourself. You know, I would say document everything. Yeah. You probably don't want to document your violations, right? Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying even violate everyone, but they texted the white tester about the crime rate and some recent gang activities. Wow. That's completely two different sides of the fence, everyone. But they had no idea that each of them had no idea the other had received drastically different information. Again, words, phrases, actions are influence. And I think we're going to see some of that as people look to steer. By the way, you know, one of the things that drives me a little bit crazy about this issue is that so many of your agents believe that they are acting, as this woman said, in good advice, right? They're protecting people with this information. Yeah. And when I start looking at, you know, this information that's going around right now in association with this virus, I see all sorts of ways that people are potentially going to violate fair housing regulations by steering them to towards or away from particular actions that will come into play from there. Let me move this out of the way. What am I talking about is a potential discriminatory group here? Well, I think, everyone, you're going to see potentially medical conditions being talked about. Let me rephrase that. I already know we're talking about medical conditions right now. I think, everyone, that potentially has the possibility of, in essence, being handicap status. All right. I don't have a crystal ball, everyone. I don't know what side of the issue they're coming through in. I do know that although the recommendations haven't been to use some of the things that are floating around here, and they have not been created by any of our legal teams, Greater Boston's, MARs, et cetera, from them, they are not going as far as telling people they can't use them. I'm looking down the pike a little bit farther, and I think you are really at risk when you start asking anything that relates to the medical field. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about some of the requirements right now that we're seeing out there that that someone indicates whether they have had a fever, they have been exposed to, they have had the virus. So let me just ask you, raise your hands if you have seen any of these addendums and or using them that are asking some of this information of buyers before they enter into property. And again, no, no one sees, like you raise your hand, everyone, so feel free. Yeah, yeah, I have about half a dozen hands going up from that. Yeah. Um, I'm going to tell you, I think everyone, we're going to have to really pay very close attention to this issue. Whenever I get into anything in regards to sort of physical or mental medical attributes, I think you come dangerously close to potentially doing that handicap status. So, and again, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how the interpretation will be of this. Maybe they will leave this as open and so that this becomes very public. We have no idea how the testing of immunity to this disease is going to go. We know that there's a huge amount of people who are believed to have been asymptomatic and have already been exposed to this. So I don't know where this is going, but I'm going to say to you, you need to pay very close attention to this issue. The second thing we're starting to see, and this has always been an issue, particularly in the rental market. So I know many of you have spent a full day through the rental the right way training with me. Of course, that we wrote at Greater Boston to address the rental industry in that segment of our business. And we know that this has clearly been an issue, that many landlords want to arbitrarily restrict the number of people. And since we have just spent, already what, 3 or 4, it feels like 3 months, everyone, but I think 3 weeks in social isolation. We have a couple more weeks to go. I'm knocking on wood at a couple more weeks that it doesn't extend any longer, but we know that this is an issue. We know that we're already talking. We know we've seen the governor talk about this. We've seen Dr. Fauci talk about this. So as we restrict gatherings, are we going to potentially be looking to restrict the number of people in occupancy as well? And is the excuse going to be the spread of the virus or et cetera from that? Well, don't forget that number of people or occupancy clearly can be a fair housing issue under familial status. And you know that I have always recommended that you use a neutral or objective criteria for occupancy, and that is BOCA, the Building Occupancy and Code Administration. And I'm going to continue to recommend that unless we see communities have different occupancy rules, enact different rules, then, and what I call a higher authority. And we've actually already seen that within the city of Boston. I've discussed it with many of you who are Boston rental agents, that in the occupancy permitting process in Boston, they actually put a number on that, and in some cases lower than it would be under BOCA. They're the higher authority. If the fair housing industry has an issue, they're going to take it up with the city of Boston, not necessarily you. So I think that's something you need to pay very close attention to. It could come into the sale process as well. We don't know whether people will look. Sellers make all sorts of decisions about who should and shouldn't buy their house, many of which really doesn't affect them, but they're quote unquote protecting their neighbors or their neighborhood or their environment or whatever, or enacting their own prejudices, right? Enacting their own prejudices. And again, that is going to be a significant impact. And the third issue, I think, is going to be ethnic groups, which is going to obviously violate our national origin. And we unfortunately have already seen a great presence of that sort of negativity, that rearing of the ugly part of the head when we move into crisis already. You know that they have spent a great deal of time in New York now over the past couple of days, expressing the fact that New Yorkers were most likely exposed to the virus through a European strain, not through the Wuhan Chinese aspect of it, because their Asian community is suffering. We saw it here in Boston as well. we may continue to see it in the real estate industry. And that is something I think we need to pay very close attention to. And in regards to these issues, I think it's not just training your agents about what they can and can't do. It's also making sure your agents have a clear path to getting help or assistance when they're faced with these issues. And again, I am not as worried about your agents, although some agents I am worried about, but I'm not as worried about them as I'm worried about how they'll handle what's going on in the consumer end of the marketplace. And I had a deep discussion with a good friend of mine, as a national speaker under the Code of Ethics, when I came in contact and social distancing contact. I was standing at my door, and my a neighbor was walking by, and hi, how are you? And we were chatting, and he went off on a rampage about all these foreigners and bringing in, et cetera. And I already knew he had a tremendous amount of prejudice, and that was not an appealing quality of his at all, in my opinion. But this was just a sort of way of igniting that flame for him. So are your agents going to be prepared to deal with it? Are they going to make the right decisions? Is your door open? Can they understand that? Do they understand that through you can go to the legal hotlines and get some more advice or counsel, and that you can make some decisions? And you also know, does your agent know? Do you know? Are you reinforcing with each other? You don't have to work with everyone. You don't have to expose yourself or clients within your company or other clients to this kind of danger that may actually not start with you, but start with the consumer. So I think that's important, that you understand exactly how those things are going as well, from that aspect to it. I'm at this point, great question. Am I telling you not to ask if anyone had the virus or not, or symptoms of the virus? I'm not telling you either way right now. Okay, I am simply giving you a heads up that the possibility of asking that question, particularly in the future when we're all out and about, all right, is potentially dangerous. Right now, my understanding is when those questions or forms have been floated through legal counsel, although they have not advised the use of them, they have not told you that you can't or shouldn't use them. That's what's coming through. So I'm not making a suggestion at all. However, I would clearly suggest, before you ask those things formally or informally, that you have reviewed them with legal counsel and kept updated on the review of those things. Because again, I think it has the potential of the risk outweighing the benefit. And don't get me wrong, I clearly see the benefit of finding out if there's a risk of exposure to your buyer, to your seller, or to the agents involved in that. So great question. And don't get me wrong here, everyone, I wish I had better answers for a lot of these issues, but a lot of what I'm doing is just raising awareness for you so that you're watching how we come down, because this is just so ever evolving from now. The second thing I want to point out to you is identification. Again, an issue that has always been part of our problem with fair housing. And that is, like, as I like to say, asking for or giving identification. In the past, when I talked about this issue, I used to give the example that was very frequent when people who had lead paint would attempt to restrict exposure of lead paint to children by asking, do they have any children? Do they have young children, et cetera? And I tried to explain to everyone that you can't abide by lead law by violating fair housing law. Children are a protected class. Remember, they came up on that screen that I just showed you. And so asking for or giving that identification is actually a fair housing violation. So great example, except what does it have to do with where we are right now? Well, what it has to do right now is are your agents, are your buyers or sellers going to start asking things like, how many people are they of this ethnic persuasion, or the even possibility of their medical aspect in relation to this virus, which again, the interpretation in the future, we don't know, this could be, it might be handicap status. So asking for or giving identification, guys, I got stick figures that are buyers and I got green money for sellers, right? Those are the two things that I'm trying to coordinate. I'm trying to get my stick figures to come up with enough green money that my sellers, the sellers agree to. I can't ever, in particular in this environment, care about who would, could, should, will, do, live in that particular property, whether that's a rental or a sale, right? Are most important, that we have to stop naming people, right? And I hear it all the time in class, and the questions start, well, Jody, I have a couple, I have a guy, I have an, someone from, Asia, I have someone, and they label the people before the question even comes up. I don't care what the people are. It doesn't make any difference, right? In the situation. So remember this encompasses the entire protected class status. So I have to pay careful attention to what those protected classes are and how I indicate them. And then don't forget, everyone, that a preference, implicit or implied, is also an illegal action, which is often how we see that aspect of steering or discrimination, is when they give preferential treatment over one group over the other. So we want to be really, really careful about, again, who would, could, should, will, do, live in the particular property. And here's one that I really want everybody to pay attention to, everyone, because guys, you're actually looking at one of hundreds, if not thousands, of real life examples that I have in my database that I can cut and paste into presentations like this that I use all the time, where not only is there an implicit preference to someone, wonderful family, right? It's like in capitals and shouting, and it's in print, everyone. And by the way, this came from a feed out of the MLS. So this appeared in MLS and then gets fed out as advertising, everyone. And what's really important is that many of your agents, if not most, if not really almost all of your agents, literally do their own advertising themselves because they're data entering this into multiple listing. And within 20 minutes, that MLS system is feeding it out to, the third-party aggregators, your site, my site, everybody else's site, and now it's advertising, right? Now it's advertising. So I think you need to be very careful. You got to have eyes on the street. This is an issue that we have consistently had. And again, will this issue be more impactful? It may be, and it may have actually nothing to do. I don't foresee a COVID-19 survivor needing an assistance animal, although frankly, I guess the emotional distress could raise the number. I just think it's going to come hand in hand with the handicap status here. If you have not already taken a look at the video that NAR has done in regards to assistance animals and the regulations to it, I highly recommend you do, so that your agents know immediately in regards to what they should be asking, what they should be requesting, how they should be interacting through this process. So if you just go to nar.realtor, everyone, and just put in the search feature, windows to the law, assistance animals, this video right here, and this is the screenshot from it, so you'll be able to find it. You, again, play that. By the way, for all of you who are doing virtual office meetings, these things that I'm mentioning that are websites and videos and links, these are wonderful tools to use. Most of you are using platforms like this. I'm using GoToWebinar. Many of you are using Zoom that allow you to screen share and show these to everyone. So these are wonderful tools to be using right now to make sure your agents have the up-to-date information. And what do I want to really say to you, everyone, is, again, make sure you're using the equal housing logo in everything you're doing. Make sure you have a policy regarding advertising. Review that office policy. Again, make sure everything's about the property. Don't use the people who would, could, should look there. Review the ads and keep your eye on the folder, I think is really significant. And here is, everyone, the link. And again, I'm going to highly recommend you view it if you've not already, and you have your agents view it. Here's where you can find it. Type into the Google search engine Newsday, Long Island Divided, and you will be able to find it and link directly to the full presentation with the full 40-minute video and all the micro videos that are in it. By the way, please make sure you review your connection to your errors and omission insurance. And if you don't know, many errors and omission insurance gives you a discount if you conduct an annual training to fair housing. All right, so you have a requirement for an annual training. By the way, you don't actually have to conduct it. You can make sure they get out to the local association. Almost every association that I know runs fair housing at least as a CE requirement. So you can mandate that your agents take that. You can bring someone in internally to do it. You can run a virtual session like this to do it, and that may discount. Again, I'm not saying every insurance, but a number of them have that discount built in. So those are some real things to kind of pay attention to and look for and understand what's going through. So here's my second biggest risk, everyone, and this is cybersecurity. And again, as I've shared with you, I've been out there talking about these issues for about 1.5 years within this presentation. I've probably been talking about these issues longer than that. I am not a cybersecurity expert. Another great resource, everyone, that we have right here in Massachusetts is one of the people who's a premier expert on cybersecurity, and he has been speaking within the real estate industry for years. So if you have not seen Robert Siciliano, I highly recommend it. Go on to just Google his name. You'll find his website, Robert Siciliano. He's a Massachusetts guy. I actually think he's originally from Melrose, if I'm not mistaken. He has a number of presentations and information you can find on YouTube, etc. We've been friends for years, and now even closer as speakers. We cross paths even more often. So he's the one I recommend as the expert, but I'm going to go through a number of things that he and a number of other people have taught me over the years of some real issues. And I think you need to not only be paying attention of these things from your side, but you need to particularly pay attention to them from the agent who is now definitively working at home. And I said this in the last episode, and I'm going to repeat it here. I don't know that they're ever coming back into the office. I think one of the biggest changes in the real estate industry will be what has been on the horizon, everyone, for probably 10 to 15 years. It's just we didn't really get any closer to it. Now we just took this like giant quantum leap forward towards it. And I think we're going to see a great reduction of bricks and mortar in our industry, a great reduction. So I don't know that they're ever coming back in the office, which means that so much of this is critically important for you to understand and get them to understand now, and will be to have systems and plans implemented in the future. So what are some of the things we're talking about? Their emails, their social media, their unsecured connections, their clients' personal and private information, their public access, internet access, their mobile devices, all right, which is all things that should have protection and prevention encouraged into them. So there's just so many resources that these things are flying out off of the wheel, and they're really exposing themselves, they're exposing you, and they're exposing their clients to extreme harm, in many instances, what I'm going to share with you, financial harm that potentially is coming your way. So what are some of the technologies at risk? And I actually put everyone something here that I want to share with you right up front, because this is one of the latest things that is going around is the application that appears to be from the World Health Organization. Now, just to give you a heads up, this is a real screenshot from the World Health Organization. My understanding is it looks exactly the same colors, the same logo, etc. Unfortunately, it is embedded with a Trojan horse, a worm, malware, whatever you want to call it, which then allows the attackers to do all sorts of really bad aspects to it. So talk about playing on your vulnerabilities. That's classically what happens in these particular issues. And so they realize that everyone is looking at the latest information, share the latest information with their clients. And so they're putting it out as appearing to be this information. So make sure your agents know about this scam of applications appearing as if they are an app from the World Health Organization that are embedded with some really nasty and dangerous things. So in regards to the types of devices they have, here are some of the things I think we really need to pay attention to. And I put on the top of my list, everyone, the fact that many agents were not prepared to not only be mobilized themselves, but to be in a situation where they had other people in their household that needed the access to these devices. And all of a sudden, what may have been their laptop or their tablet or their phone is being shared and used by other people working from home or household and people who are homeschooling now, right? No one was necessarily prepared for that. So devices have multiple users on them now, they're being shared. And it's significantly important that then everyone understands the security risks that everyone needs to take. So you don't need your tablet or your laptop in the hands of a teenager or a small child who's going to download what appears to be a game, which used to be our #1 portal for putting malware on, and I'm sure it's still potentially out there, and then putting your client's transaction at risk because that malware is now on your laptop. So really important everyone understand that sharing devices is not an ideal situation. It may not be able to be rectified now, but it should not be your ideal working environment from that. The mobile devices are significantly important because, again, many of our mobile devices do not have the security embedded in them that our desktops and laptops have had for quite a while. So they aren't necessarily the ability to kind of connect in and see that we are downloading malware in these apps and et cetera. So everyone needs to understand that, yes, we realize that, again, as we all share devices, we need multiple aspects to it, that there is some differences in securities to your mobile devices. Our third one, everyone, is something that most of us put in a closet, in a bookshelf, and somewhere in our house, a router. Half of us actually don't even own our routers. They're renting them, although I don't know why you are, because it's costing you a heck of a lot more. But half of us are not even in ownership of those routers, and they don't realize that that router is the gateway to much of the cyber crimes that go on in our environment. So be careful, everyone. Make sure people understand what their routers are. And just a slight FYI, I was really fortunate that I upgraded my router just before all this happened, because I had so many smart devices on it. I was starting to slow it down. And so I said, I'm just going to bite the bullet and get this upgraded router. And I did that. I don't know. I think it was January. I went out and upgraded my router, and I'm so thankful that I did. And with that, have some real new securities that are there. I debated whether I wanted to talk about this, because I thought, well, we're not out and about. We're not sitting in Starbucks any longer and sitting on public networks. That said, I realized that something happens to me right here in my own home that could potentially happen to your agents as well, not only in their home, but as they're kind of even just driving around. And that is, if I walk out into my backyard, everyone, I actually, my phone, although, and I keep changing it so this won't happen, and then it doesn't, and then it does. But my phone and my tablet will pick up my next door neighbors. Their house is set back just a little from mine, so their house is actually, in line with my backyard. And I pick up their free Xfinity Wi-Fi instead of my own. Yeah. So if I go out and I get on my device and I don't look at what I've connected to, it will connect to that. And then I go in and I delete it or change the way the list is, et cetera. So it'll pick up mine. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to maintain that as a criteria. And every once in a while, I will notice again that it has picked up, instead of my own secured Wi-Fi, it is picked up. And again, if you have one of those rented routers from and modems from Xfinity, there's a public portal to it. All right. Now, they claim that public portal does not affect your private portal, but here's the problem: is you might be surrounded by people with public portals, and you might find yourself or someone else in the family logging on with your device to the unencrypted public portal, and therefore you put yourself at risk. That is also true, as maybe you're not sitting in Starbucks, but maybe you're driving around using public Wi-Fi that's still out and available. So again, everyone should understand that they put themselves, their household information, and more importantly, their transaction and client information at risk as they use public networks. Also, everyone, we need to keep a really close eye on the scams that are going out and about here. This is actually, I know this is kind of small, you can't really see it too well, but I actually cut and pasted an email that I received. I was part of the investigation, or the process of investigation, for the FBI here in Massachusetts when we were seeking out some scam emails that were going around. And this is one that I had in regards to referrals, looking for referrals. Now, it automatically raises suspicion to me because I don't list or sell real estate any longer. I speak strictly as for a living. And so when it was someone looking at referrals saying they had met me, it immediately appears wrong to me. But it's not going to appear wrong to your client, to your agents at all. What should appear wrong, everyone, is I did the drop-down box from the gentleman's name, all right? And you can see that the email address doesn't even meet the criteria of the agent. But unfortunately, in Gmail, which is what I use primarily as my platform, you got to drop down the box. And I think that's true in so many email platforms. You have to drop down the box and make it apparent so you can see the actual email address instead of the name that they put in. And I think that's an important lesson to teach your agents, and by the way, that you should be doing yourself, because currently, right now, the #1 email scam is not money transfers to your agent, which is what we were to your clients in this situation. And that still exists, everyone, where they're where they've loaded malware onto your computer. They've gotten into your email system. They can see the emails being transferred between your agent, Bob, and his client, Susie, about her upcoming transaction. And then they intercept a money transfer, a wire transfer email, put a fake one in there, and there goes Susie's down payment. All right. That is still happening. That has been happening for a while, but we've been talking about that, and hopefully everyone knows they've been using the wire transfer fraud notification that MER came up with a couple of years ago, well, at least a year ago now, that they've had it. So we're aware of that. But here's a new one that's going on out there. And this one caught even Barbara Corcoran, right? Everyone knows Barbara Corcoran. You know her from the Shark Tank, but you might not know is Barbara actually is a fellow real estate agent. She is the founder of the Corcoran Group. She's no longer an owner of it. She sold it off for a lot of money. But Barbara received an email from her, from a person in her financing, accounting, area of her business, asking her to transfer money to one of her clients. And it was really important. He wasn't able to do it. Could she do it? And she needed to do it right away. And Barbara sent the money. It was a scam, right? So emails are now coming from who looks like it should be your financial position, people dealing with your finances, asking you to transfer money. Brokers, everyone, you need to make sure that anyone who has the ability to touch money, your brokers with escrow, your managers with escrow accounts, your financial people, your staff, they're all working from home as well. They need to verify any information that requires transfer of money internally within your company, right? This one is spreading rapidly. So make sure you understand that as well. We're also seeing ransomware being cut on. That means when they're going to shut down your system. Can you imagine if your system right now got shut down, your transaction management platform, your email system, any of those things that you're using to vitally operate remotely? That's a huge issue. And we're also seeing the hacking and ransoming of social media accounts out there. So in the last probably 3 or 4 weeks, I've seen 3 of the accounts that I follow on Instagram all hacked and taken up for ransom. So what you should make sure that whenever possible, you and your agents have 2-step authentication. That's just like a really hard word to say. Set in place so that when they go on and they go to do something or change something that requires an email, a text message, or etc. from that. All right. So make sure that those things are set in place so that you can prevent some of these scams. And then I want to talk about the points of access and those sort of vulnerables or weak spots that exist in all of us. And by the way, I think it's important that number one, you make sure that you have addressed many of these issues from an internal side whenever possible. So if you've not had a conversation with your IT person, company, or department since you've been working from at home, and so have all your agents and your staff and employees, then you need to get on the phone right now and say, what do we have in place? What should we have had in place? What do we need to be careful of? What should we be upgrading now? What is possible, etc., and be looking at that aspect. I already talked about the router, everyone, and that's really important. Your router should be encrypted and secure, and frankly, I'm not sure that there's a need necessarily to put that burden on the agent, because frankly, I think almost all of them do automatically now encrypt and secure. They'd have to have a really old modem or router, and in which case their problem isn't their point of access. Their problem is they're really struggling to work at home with older equipment and upgrading. Even those that have the public Wi-Fi, they're supposedly separated by a firewall from the encrypted side of it. But that said, I think it's a good conversation to have with everyone. Was your working at home a smooth environment, and should you have potentially upgraded that information? Here's the one I think everyone should be having a conversation with, and you should be doing it yourself first, is your passwords, everyone, should be updated, they should be secure, and they should not be stored in notepads, notebooks, public access, etc. Everyone should be using a password protection program. I happen to use one password. That's the number one, everyone, password. LastPass is another big one that people like to use as well. That password protection program, all I have to remember, mine's called 1Password, and I think it's also the rationale behind the name LastPass, because that's the only one you have to remember. You get into that, you get into everything else. It cross-populates all my platforms from that. And not only keeps all my passwords, it generates passwords. I couldn't tell you a password for anything I have, everyone, because they're all like capital T, small I, XY, explanation right there. All a mixture of symbols and letters. They're all ultimately secure passwords. Ian, my favorite part of my program is it tells me passwords that I need to update. And so on a regular basis, I want to say I'm pretty sure it's no more than 3 months. If it's even that, it identifies my financial, my bank account passwords. Time to update it. Doesn't matter how secure they think it is, time to update it, all right? One of the first things everyone should have done when they went to work from home is change their passwords. And if they haven't done so, they should be doing so right now. Third, everyone, is I know that you were not prepared as well to work from home. Neither were some of your agents, and they needed tools that they didn't have that were back in the office, particularly staff, right? So they're downloading apps and software. Be careful of that, all right? Be very careful. Make sure you've doubled and triple checked what you are logging on to. I don't like to log on and download anything from a link. I like to go over to the site to, make sure people understand that as well, that they go through. Also, make sure that everyone has uploaded software updates. And most importantly, I'm going to go back to that mobile device. That's about the only protection your mobile device has for the flaws that are in the system that people can they're going to look for the low-hanging fruit, everyone. Those people that they can still get in, open back doors because they've not updated their software. Turn on your automatic updates. Make sure you're uploading and updating your software that's going on, and make sure you are looking for that shared use to that information. So the last thing I'm going to say is, what should you be looking for? Is I think you should be looking for their social media, what's going on, what they have. Make sure you have a policy regarding that. And again, that you've sort of trained and reviewed that information that's going through, and that you're looking forward to it. Once again, I know I've got rapidly talking on you, got a lot of information out. It's hard to believe how fast an hour goes for us here. I do want to remind everyone again, I put the link in the platform so you can join me on Monday for implementing change. As we have talked about, these things are changes for people. Many of the things, hard decisions we talked about in our first sessions are going to be changes that we've had to implement, and we're going to have to walk people through some of these changes. This is a program that I developed many years ago when going through some major changes within a company I'm working for, and I found the systems and the techniques really helpful. So for those of you who are making those hard decisions, make sure you join us. Again, remember, on that same link are the uploads of the videos. This is also being recorded. Here's all my contacts. Please reach out to me. If there's anything I can help you with, please reach out to me and let me know. I'm more than glad to. And I want to thank everybody for joining me. I really appreciate this hour of your time. Have a great weekend. I know it's going to be a little bit different of a weekend than most of you had planned for your holiday weekend, but I hope you enjoy it and you and your family get some time, whether that's in person or virtually together. Thanks, everyone.